In this video, we're going to discuss triggers and ports. And I have the animation set up here for several different activities: blinking, step function, and alternate pin flashing. We're going to be using Digitrax today, but any DCC system will work. And what you'll get with your controller is a wire which has a green and yellow wire with a white plug. It's a 2-pin plug, and this goes into this small little white little hole here, and it only goes one way. The smooth side of the pin goes up, and the place where you can see a little bit of metal shining goes down, and we're going to just plug that in. And what's going to happen is the system recognized there was a DCC signal, and because I already have the pins set up for triggers and that they're off, all the lights went off. So let's talk about the theory here first for a second. So there are 16 ports going across the top, and in this controller I had the address is set to 1. So in that case, the DCC address lines up exactly with the port numbers, but that's not always the case. In fact, very often it will not be the case. So if we want to turn on pin 1, we activate switch number 1. If we want to activate port 8, we would activate DCC address, switch address 8. All right, so there's an even match there. So let's take a look at this, and what we'll do is I'll show you the configuration. We'll take it out of animation mode. Port 1 is on blink. It also happens to be set to port trigger number 1. Now, since the device number is 1, let's go and make sure that that's the case. Oh, we have DCC set up as 3. So let's change this. It's very simple. We just scroll down. We want the new address to be 1, and we're going to save that. In the case of changing the DCC address, you just hold the save button for 5 seconds, and then it will tell you. So now the new DCC address is 1. And so when we go to turn this on, we want to set the switch command on our, let's see, on our system here to 1, and a closed control is on. So closed is on, thrown is off. So I'm turning it closed, and you can see that the port is now active. Now what it's doing, in this case blinking, is dependent upon your configuration. So all of this triggering and port stuff does is turn the port on to do whatever animation it was doing. And in fact, the animation is still running behind, but the port output has been turned off. All right, let's go down to let's look at some other animations here on 11 and 12. You saw me with the alternate flashing. So I'll put it into animation mode, and we'll go down, and you can see that port 11 is set to flash and port 12 is set to flash. All right, and what we want to do is look at the trigger. Oops, sorry, wrong button. The trigger for port 12 is 10. Okay, well that's sorry, not port 12. Let's go back to 10. Port 10, no, it's 11 and 12. Here we go. So the trigger is set for, let's set it for 11. Okay, so ports 11 and 12, we're going to set the trigger to 11 and save that. And then we're going to go to port 12 and change that to also to 11. So basically what we're doing is putting the same trigger on 2 pins. All right, and we put it back into animation mode. All right, so now we have to go to our controller, and we'll turn on number 1, and now we're going to do port trigger number 11 and turn that on. And you can see that the trigger 11 is set for both 11 and 12. Now, if I've aligned the pin up, but I don't have to use 11 and 12, I could use trigger 5. So let's just do that just to show you how flexible this is. So we're going to get out of animation mode. We're going to go to port 11, and we're going to go to the place where you set the trigger, and I'm going to set it to 5. And I'm going to go to port 12 and set its trigger also to 5. Okay, and go back into animation mode. And now I'm going to change switch 5 to closed. There we go. And the light comes on. All right. So on the bottom here, what we're saying is we have all these ports, and the port number doesn't change, of course. The triggers are 1 through 16, so whatever port trigger, but the DC address might be a little bit different based on what address you have. So for example, here's one where we have the primary address, instead of 1, we have it as 15. So the DC addresses are all the way from 15 to 30. So we have these ports down here. For trigger 1, set to pin 1, the DCC address is 15. So in order to make this work, we would turn on address 15. And so the way to do that, so let's just do that, and that'll be the last of this demo. We'll go to the DCC setting. All right, and we'll set this to 15. All right, and we'll save that. So once we finish this, that means that the first port address is now 15. Okay, so instead of hitting 1 to get that first one on, we're going to enter 15, and you can see that fires away. All right, so there's another set here. You'll see on this chart that I have a set of 4 2s. There's a step function, and what it does is it cycles 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Well, if I set it as 2, the second address is going to be 16. So let's put that in here and turn it on. And you can see that 1 2 3 4 5. I've got 5 of them set to the second trigger, which happens to be address 16. I know that may sound a little confusing, but it gives you enormous flexibility. So start with the simple ones here, where you have the port address, the DCC address lined up with the device. Play with that. And then, because you may have switches in your layout and so forth, whatever your first DCC address is will be trigger number 1, 16 would be trigger number 2, 17 would be trigger number 3, and so forth all the way down the chart. All right, so we've got that on. So now we had 5 for this one over here, so it would be 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 will be the DCC address to get that one to go. And there it goes. Very cool. So we're going to have a controller with external triggers. So we're using DCC as a trigger. You'll also be able to connect wires to here or the sensor hub to here, and you'll be able to configure this. But you don't need to have 16 ports, and you don't, to get this configuration, for example, just set them all to 1 trigger, and just setting that 1 trigger turns them on. Of course, if you took that to the extreme, if you wanted all the lights to go on with 1 button on your DCC controller, just set all the triggers to 1, and whatever your DCC address is for the device, when you turn the switch on that for that, all of the ports will become active.